The morning sun shimmered across the grand gates of Buckingham Palace. Tourists whispered, cameras clicked, and history seemed to stand still. But in the crowd that day, one man decided to test that stillness. Marcus Sullivan, a wealthy American with more ego than sense, unclipped the leash of his bulldog and uttered a single word that froze time. Attack. Gasps filled the air. A royal guard stood motionless, unblinking, unflinching, as 60 pounds of muscle charged straight toward him. Everyone expected chaos. Instead, what happened next became a royal moment the world would never forget. One that silenced the crowd, melted arrogance, and revealed the quiet strength of true honor. If stories of unexpected courage and human transformation move you, stick around. This one's worth every second. Before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and tap that bell icon, not just to support our channel, but because every week we share stories that remind us there's still beauty, humility, and power in kindness. Ready to see how a single moment turned pride into purpose? Let's begin. The morning sun spilled over Buckingham Palace like liquid gold. The cobblestones gleamed beneath the soft haze of London air. Tourists lined up behind the silver barriers, phones raised, murmuring in anticipation of the world's most precise performance, the changing of the guard. And among the sea of visitors stood Marcus Sullivan, a name that carried weight back in New York. 38 years old, sharp suit, polished shoes, the kind of man who believed the rules were meant for everyone but him. Beside him sat his bulldog, Tank, 60 pounds of compact muscle, trained to obey one voice only, Marcus's. Tank wasn't dangerous by nature, but his owner's energy had taught him to be alert, tense, ready to dominate. Marcus scanned the signs along the palace fence. No pets beyond this point. Keep distance from the guards. He smirked. Well, he muttered, rules are for tourists. He slipped past the barrier. Cameras lifted. Voices rose. Sir, excuse me, you can't. A palace officer called, but Marcus kept walking. Tank followed, leash taut, snorting with each heavy breath. In front of them stood a single guard, tall, rigid, face unreadable beneath the shadow of a towering bearskin hat. His rifle was fixed across his chest, his boots aligned in perfect symmetry. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't see the growing disturbance around him. And that right there fascinated Marcus. The stillness, the discipline, the idea that someone could stand like a statue unbothered by chaos. Marcus whispered under his breath, let's see if he's really human. He crouched, unclipped Tank's leash, and with a cruel smirk, spoke one word. Attack. For a moment, Tank hesitated, ears perked. Marcus repeated louder this time, go, and Tank launched forward. Gasps erupted. A woman screamed. The guard still didn't move, not an inch. The bulldog's nails scraped the stones, his low growl vibrating through the courtyard. The crowd leaned back instinctively, cameras trembling in their hands. Security began sprinting toward the scene, but they were too far. Marcus's grin widened. He wanted to see panic, to prove that beneath that red uniform stood just another man pretending to be brave. But then, something extraordinary happened. Just as Tank was seconds away from reaching him, the guard moved. Not his body, not his rifle.
Just his tongue. A single, subtle click echoed in the still air, the soft sound one uses to call a dog an affection, not defense. Then, in a calm, almost fatherly tone, the guard spoke 2 words. Good boy. That was it. 2 simple words. The bulldog froze mid-run, his momentum fading into confusion. He sat down, tail wagging gently. The snarl melted into curiosity. The courtyard fell into complete silence. You could hear the wind sweep through the palace gates. Every camera was still. Every jaw dropped. The royal guard had tamed a charging dog, without even lifting a hand. Marcus blinked, stunned. He felt something unfamiliar. Not power, not control, but humiliation. Tank, his fierce companion, was now wagging his tail at the man he'd been ordered to attack. And then came the moment that silenced London. Still staring straight ahead, posture perfect, the guard spoke again, his voice calm but cutting through the morning air like a blade through glass. "Sir," he said, "your dog responded to kindness, not cruelty. Perhaps you could learn the same lesson." There was no anger in his tone, no boast, just truth. Marcus felt it deep in his chest. The words hit harder than any punishment could have. Seconds later, palace security arrived. 2 officers restrained Marcus while another gently reattached Tank's leash. The dog offered no resistance, no growl, only a quiet, submissive look toward the guard, as if sensing who the true leader was. Marcus struggled to form words. He wanted to argue, justify, deny, but all he could do was look at that soldier, that immovable symbol of grace and strength, and realize something. For the first time in his life, he had been put in his place, not by power, but by principle. As the officers led him away through the palace gates, the tourists began to clap softly, not for the spectacle, but for the soldier who had reminded them, and everyone watching, that real strength doesn't shout. It simply stands still and leads with calm. Inside the walls of Buckingham Palace, the noise of the crowd faded into silence. The air was colder here, sterile, official, a place where consequences felt heavier than words. Marcus sat in a plain white room with nothing but a table, 2 chairs, and his guilt. Tank rested quietly at his feet, head low, as if even the dog understood that something sacred had been violated. For the first time in years, Marcus wasn't in control. No boardrooms, no deals, no applause, just silence. When the door finally opened, an older man stepped inside, a senior officer, face lined by decades of discipline. His gray hair gleamed under the fluorescent light, and his eyes, sharp and assessing, carried the calm of someone who had seen far worse than arrogance. He sat across from Marcus and studied him for a long moment before speaking. "Do you understand what you did today, Mr. Sullivan?" Marcus opened his mouth, ready with an excuse. It was just a joke, but the words caught somewhere between pride and shame. He looked down. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," he muttered. The officer didn't blink. "Meaning has little value when your actions speak louder," he said quietly. "That guard you tried to provoke, his name is Corporal James Mitchell. 2 tours in Afghanistan, a man who has stared down real danger. And yet when your dog charged, he didn't see a threat. He saw a frightened animal and a man who needed a lesson in respect." The word struck deep. Marcus swallowed hard, eyes flicking toward Tank, who was now dozing, peaceful as a lamb. The irony wasn't lost on him. The officer continued, his tone calm but unwavering. "Protocol allows lethal defense in such cases. He could have hurt your dog, and no one would have blamed him. But he didn't, because true discipline isn't about control. It's about choice, knowing when to act and when to show mercy." For a long moment, there was silence, the kind that doesn't demand a reply but expects reflection. Marcus nodded slowly, his voice soft. "I need to apologize," he said. The officer stood, motioning toward the door. "Then you'll get that chance." They walked through a maze of corridors until they stepped into a small courtyard behind the main barracks. There, sitting on a bench beside Tank, now on a fresh leash, was Corporal James Mitchell, out of uniform, dressed in simple fatigues. He looked younger up close, his calm demeanor masking the kind of maturity that only war teaches. When Marcus approached, Mitchell stood at ease, disciplined yet approachable. The senior officer nodded and stepped back, leaving the 2 men alone. Marcus hesitated, then spoke. "I owe you an apology. What I did was unforgivable. I disrespected you, your position, and I used my dog like a weapon. I thought I was proving something. Turns out, I was only proving how small I really am." Mitchell listened quietly. He didn't interrupt. When Marcus finished, the guard's expression softened slightly. "Sir," he said evenly, "I appreciate your apology, but I want you to understand something. When your dog ran at me, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't angry. I just saw an animal trained to obey fear instead of trust. Tank isn't cruel. He's reflecting what has been taught." Marcus blinked, feeling each word land with precision. Mitchell crouched, gently patting Tank's head. The Bulldog wagged his tail shyly. "I grew up on a farm in Yorkshire," Mitchell continued. "My father used to say, a dog reflects its master. Treat a dog with fear, and he'll learn fear. Treat him with respect, and he'll protect you with his life. The military taught me the same truth. Leadership isn't shouting the loudest. It's earning trust quietly. Something shifted in Marcus's chest. For years, he'd led his company through intimidation and control, believing fear meant authority. But watching this man, who commanded respect without raising his voice, cracked something open inside him. He looked at Tank, then back at the corporal. "Can you teach me?" he asked softly. "Teach me to do better, for him, for myself." Mitchell glanced at the senior officer, who gave a small approving nod. Then he turned back to Marcus. "I'm no dog trainer," he said with a half-smile. "But I can show you what works. Patience, consistency, kindness. Respect isn't demanded, Mr. Sullivan. It's earned, one calm command at a time." He knelt again and began showing Marcus simple hand signals, using soft tones and clear eye contact. Tank responded instantly, tail wagging, body relaxed. The transformation was stunning. The same Bulldog that once lunged in fury now sat proudly, waiting for praise. Marcus felt his throat tighten. For the first time in years, he wasn't performing. He was learning. The courtyard filled with quiet harmony, the rhythm of patience replacing the noise of pride. And somewhere between those simple lessons, Marcus realized something deeper. The guard hadn't just tamed his dog. He'd tamed his ego. 6 months later, the London skyline glowed beneath a soft evening haze. Red buses rolled past the palace gates, and the sound of the guard's boots striking stone echoed in disciplined rhythm. But one man stood outside the crowd this time, quietly, humbly. Marcus Sullivan. Gone was the polished arrogance. His suit had been replaced by a simple jacket, his posture less rigid, his eyes softer. Beside him sat Tank, calm, alert, tail swaying gently. The leash hung loose, not as a restraint, but as a symbol of trust. They weren't here to prove anything. They were here to remember. A few months earlier, Marcus's world had changed entirely. After his apology to Corporal Mitchell, he had kept his promise, attending animal behavior classes, completing community service, and volunteering at a veteran support charity. What began as an obligation became a transformation. He'd met soldiers who had faced horrors beyond imagination, yet spoke with humility and grace. He'd watched them comfort one another, rebuild their lives, and teach others to do the same. For Marcus, it was like being reborn, stripped of ego, grounded in empathy. He learned that kindness wasn't weakness. It was the highest form of strength. Back home in New York, that lesson echoed through every part of his life. At work, he changed how he led. No shouting. No intimidation, just example. His employees began to smile more. Productivity soared. His company grew stronger than ever, not from fear, but from trust. And in his personal life, the change was even deeper. He called his sister to apologize for years of distance. He reconnected with his daughter, promising never to let business steal moments that mattered. And every morning, he trained Tank with patience and praise, a partnership built not on dominance, but on love. Then one morning, he received a letter from London. It was handwritten, signed Corporal James Mitchell. "Mr. Sullivan," it read, "we all stumble at times. What matters is not the fall, but the choice to stand up as a better man. I'm proud you chose a harder path. If you ever find yourself back in London, the coffee's on me." And so Marcus returned. That evening, he met Mitchell at a small cafe not far from Buckingham Palace. The guard, now off duty, greeted him with a warm smile. The handshake between them carried the quiet weight of shared respect. Marcus opened his phone and showed photos. Tank sitting beside children at a local hospital, wearing a little blue vest labeled Therapy Dog. The once aggressive Bulldog now brought comfort to sick kids, licking away tears instead of causing fear. Mitchell's smile deepened. "That's who he was meant to be," he said. "And maybe that's who you were meant to be too." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "You changed my life that day," he said softly. The corporal shook his head. "No, Marcus, you changed it yourself. I just held up a mirror." They sat for hours, two men from different worlds, bound by one timeless truth, that real power is never about control. It's about compassion. When they parted, Marcus walked away feeling something he hadn't known in years: peace. The kind that doesn't come from success, but from redemption. As he crossed the square, the faint rhythm of the Guards' march echoed in the distance, strong, steady, unwavering. Tank trotted beside him, calm and loyal. Marcus looked up at the Union Jack waving above the palace gates and whispered, "Kindness isn't weakness. It's courage, in disguise." The wind carried those words softly across the square. That day, a royal guard had shown the world, and one broke a man, that even in the face of defiance, the most powerful weapon of all is mercy. If this story touched your heart even a little, don't leave without sharing it. Hit like if you believe kindness is real strength. Subscribe for more true, emotional stories that remind us of what humanity can be: brave, compassionate, and deeply good. Drop a comment below, write down pointing backhand index. Tell us, what would you have done if you were that royal guard? Your thoughts might inspire someone who needs to hear this today.